What's up, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the broader markets. I'm going to talk about some key levels to watch for as time goes on. What's going to likely happen in Tesla stock is there's going to be a big test coming tomorrow looking at the current setup. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. Looking at Tesla so far, we're trying to hold this trend line, which is acting as support right here. And we could also draw out another resistance like this. So if you actually look at this from a different lens, we also have this resistance right here at this upper trend line. And Tesla's been going back and forth between supply and demand. As we approach the 350 to 355 area, Tesla does tend to reject. But as we approach this lower trend line, which is currently around like the 330s to 338 area, we like to bounce around there. So in essence, Tesla's rejecting again, and there's going to be a risk of us retesting these EMAs. We'll have to see if Tesla bounces around here or not. Now, tomorrow we do have some data coming out, which I'll talk about in just a couple of minutes. But I first want to talk about some news involving Tesla, then I'll break down more details about this chart. So first and foremost, just know that Wedbush is saying that Tesla will likely outperform the market. It still is reiterating this, so it does have a more optimistic view about Tesla. And then on top of that, we also happen to have the price-price ratio, which is flat. It is uptrending a little bit, which shows that Tesla has some strength remaining. But as it's flat like this is oftentimes a sign that Tesla is just going to be trading sideways for quite some time. When it comes to other factors, keep in mind that historically Tuesdays tend to be green about 51% of the time for Tesla, which is almost 50-50. And we tend to see more volatility at 11 o'clock a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Besides that, there's not really a whole lot else going on with our data. Now, there was some negative news that came out that Tesla's US market share has dropped to a nearly an 8-year low. And this is what's leading to some criticism, at least for Tesla. So if we go down right here, Tesla did once have about 80% of the US EV market share. And now it's fallen below 40%. This is once again the first time this happened since October of 2017, when it was once again ramping up its production of the Model 3. So far, it's getting criticism for this, but the question is this just because of their sales decline or because of other factors? Well, there is a lot of political intentions and a lot of things involving, higher interest rates and such that are really affecting Tesla's sales in the U.S., which is why when you look at the data right here, this is the US EV sales. We had about 120,000 or so during the 2022 period per quarter. And then in 2023 per quarter, it went up to about 160 to 170,000 on average. 2024 was around right over here around 140 to 160,000, which is not too bad per quarter. But then when we started this year in 2025, we had about 128,000 Q1 and 143,000 Q2, which is a bit of a decrease compared to what we saw in 2023 and 2024. So yes, Tesla's sales in America are down a bit because of politics and higher interest rates. Now, another thing that could be going on is that, with this decline in sales, I am hoping that Q3 is a bit better because we're approaching the end of September in just a couple of weeks. And that's when Tesla's EV tax incentives come to an end due to the new bill that was signed under the Trump administration, right? We had the $7,500 tax credit that's going to be coming to an end. It's going to be coming to an end at the end of September. And that gives a lot of buyers, Tesla buyers and such, some time to get that deal before the time comes to an end. So hopefully we see a big increase in American sales. There is some hope for that. But nonetheless, the honest trend is that there is some weakness in Tesla sales in the USA. Now, we had Roland who was talking about how the Chinese sales have come out. Tesla basically saw about 57,000 sales in China. That's basically a 2.9% market share in August. And then that is a bit of a decrease compared to what we saw before. When it comes to BEV sales, however, we saw a record of 34.4%. Tesla has an 8.3% of this segment. So that's what's going on, at least so far. That is decent data for Tesla, not that great. So the good pieces of news is that Tesla is the 9th best-selling brand in the country. It also had the Model Y being the best-selling car, but we are down 10% in the month of August this year compared to last year. So sales are down a little bit. They're also down 7% year to date, but overall, some figures were quite good when it comes to their individual sales of the Model Y. If you look at the different numbers right over here, you guys can see that for 2025, For the month so far, we are at a bit of a decrease. So like August is a little bit lower than what we saw in previous years, even for July and these other months. And then when you look at Tesla's sales in China per quarter and month, keep in mind that we do tend to be a lot stronger towards the end of the year. And then during Q3, we do tend to see a little bit of an increase, at least sometimes. So hopefully we start to see an increase in their Q3 sales. If you look at Q3 for a lot of these years, we do tend to see like a bit of an increase. Hopefully things are better. And then on top of this, when you look at our data right over here, the total sales are actually, this is the sales in China per year and month. We're doing a bit better, at least in total, compared to what we saw in previous years like 2020 and 2021. But we're still very, very short of 2023 and 2024. It's not the best of news, at least for Tesla. As a result of this negative news about their American sales declining, we're seeing Tesla dipping a bit. I know Elon Musk's pay package was good news, but it wasn't really enough to get Tesla to bounce very hard. So we could be retesting 343, and we'll have to see what happens at least after that. Now, when it comes to other pieces of news, keep in mind that the economic calendar so far is telling us that tomorrow is going to be Tuesday, September 9th. At 6 o'clock a.m., we have the Business Optimism Index report, which is quite minor, not that crazy. But it's at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 30 minutes after the stock market opens. We have the non-farm payrolls annual revision. That basically means that they're going to revise the data. That's going to give us either some better than expected numbers or an increase or decrease in the overall payrolls. That's going to show us some new revised unemployment numbers. Payrolls numbers, excuse me. And that's going to be very important for the Fed because the Fed has a dual mandate. Currently, there's a 100% chance we get some kind of a cut from the Fed, and there's an 88% chance we get a 25 basis point cut, or an 11% chance we get about a 50 basis point cut. We'll see about how that ends up being affected by the status. So expect some volatility tomorrow at 10 a.m. And then we have an important jobs report coming out. So that's going to be the revision of the data tomorrow. And then for Wednesday, we have PPI data. On Thursday, we have CPI, and then Friday, we have the Michigan Consumer Sentiment data. So all this data may cause some volatility. Besides that, Oracle announces earnings after market close on Tuesday, which is tomorrow. Then we have more retail as time goes on. Other pieces of news came out involving the Federal Reserve. We're waiting to see what's going to happen. The Fed could be under a lot of pressure and scrutiny right now to give us some kind of cut, because if we start to get worse unemployment numbers, it could tell us that the Fed is behind the curve. That could incentivize them to cut even more, but this all depends on inflationary data and other factors like that. So there's a lot of factors kind of coming into the Fed's dual mandate, so we'll see about that. Other pieces of news involving President Trump include the fact that we had our Treasury Secretary come out talk about how, that's Scott Bessent, he talked about how the Fed is in a position where, they're going to be making a lot of changes. And then he also talked about President Trump's tariffs. He said that he wants to see the Fed cut, and when it comes to President Trump's tariffs, he thinks that he's very confident the Supreme Court is going to rule in favor of President Trump and his tariffs. But he mentioned that if things don't go in their favor, they may have to refund half the tariffs revenue, which is not the best of news. That's what he was saying, but he doesn't think that's going to happen. President Trump also remains very optimistic that his tariffs will be protected by the Supreme Court, although he is open to the possibility of a plan B in case they aren't. They're going to be looking at other options to keep the tariffs. And he also mentioned that they're going to have to renegotiate a lot of trade deals if things end up changing. So that's what President Trump has been saying so far. We're going to see if we end up getting what he wants or not. So be very patient. And for now, they have been appealing to the Supreme Court. We're waiting for a decision. We'll see if the Supreme Court favors his tariffs or not. And that's what we're basically waiting for, at least for markets. So that being said, I'm just going to focus on nothing else but the charts from this point on to conclude this video. So as far as Tesla's going, as you can tell, we're in this uptrend. We're making higher lows, and we're actually going to reject off this resistance. So if you're a big bull, if you want to be a bull, you need to see Tesla basically break past 350 and hold above that. If we hold 350, I'm looking for 355 to 358. If you're a bear, if you want to see Tesla dump lower, you need to see us fail at 340. If 340 fails us, we're going to be retesting 335. And if that doesn't hold, we could be dumping to 328. So you want to be very, very careful. My prediction for Tesla is that we're going to likely see this thing shuffle in the morning, then we like to grab liquidity when we open before we start to dip a bit lower. I think Tesla's going to retest this 340 area. So I'd be very, very careful around 340 to see if we get some kind of bounce or if we reject. But I do think we dip a little bit more judging by the 4-hour time frame, the fact that Tesla's showing a little bit of weakness right now. On top of this, keep in mind that Tesla's historically a little bit weaker during, the middle of the week. And because Tesla's not holding up as well compared to the market, it does look like it's going to be retesting the low 340s before potentially bouncing. On the daily, we look kind of weak here. We also have a gap to fill around 338. So tomorrow there might be a pop before we start dipping back down to 338. The downside risk is still there for Tesla stock, in my personal opinion. So be very careful, guys. Tesla might see a little bit of downside. We gapped up very, very nicely a couple of days ago after Elon Musk's pay package proposal news came out. But since then, Tesla has a risk of some downside. Now, SPY and the QQQ are on a different boat. They're in a different boat because we're still on an uptrend for the short term. So short term, SPY has a higher high, higher low, higher low, higher low, essentially being made. But the thing is, even though we're trying to do that, we're also in a range. As we hit 650 and 652, we've been rejecting on SPY. As we hit 635, we like to bounce. So to be a bear, you want to see us basically fail at 644. If that fails us on SPY, we're going to be likely dipping to the low 640s. To be a bull, you need to basically break 652, hold above 652, and we're looking for new all-time highs. But I'm in the middle. So what I think is going to happen is this. I am noticing that we touch 650, we get a rejection. We touch 652, we get some kind of rejection. So SPY has been rejecting quite a bit for some time. Could we push? I do think we're going to try to push for like 650, maybe even like 652. But then as time goes on, we are known for getting these hard rejections here. So we're going to see if we turn back down towards 646 or so if we get some kind of like rejection from there. So there might be a small push coming to 652 and some consolidation. And then we could turn right back down towards 645. So be very, very careful with that. On the QQQ, it's basically the same setup. So notice for the short term, higher lows, and higher lows. But because we have a nice looking double bottom, we could be trying to push back up to like 582. It is possible we go a little bit higher on the QQQ, but I'd be very, very careful because of this resistance. As we touch the 580s, notice the QQQ got a rejection right here, and then another rejection. So short term, we're bullish. Higher low, higher low, higher low, and we're trying to push higher. There is upside potential, but the higher we go, the more careful I'm going to be. If you're a bear, you could be dumping back down to like 575 to dump. If you're a bull, you're looking for us to try to hold above 580. If we do, we're looking for 582 or above. And then we're going to see if we kind of like reject near 582 to turn back down like this, because keep in mind September is historically a more bearish period. And as we've been touching near 580 to 582, we do reject a bit. So I think we're going to likely continue to uptrend, and we might be retesting 580, then 582. But once we touch 582, we might not just continue to push. We could reject here and start dipping for like 575. For the IWM, we're making higher lows, and higher lows. If we lose 236, we could be dumping right back down to like 233. But as long as 236 holds, we could continue to uptrend for essentially 240. Also, when you zoom out of our chart on the IWM, we also happen to have an inverse head and shoulders like structure here. We have like a left shoulder, head, and right shoulder. And we're favoring an attempt for like 240 to 245 as our targets. So I think that as long as we don't end up losing essentially 235, we're going to be favoring a push for 240. And we could be looking for a little bit more upside, at least temporarily. On ES, we're looking bullish. As long as 64.93 does not fail us, we could slowly push back up to about 6,500 or even back up towards 65.25. So I think the upside potential is here, and we could be looking for an attempt for 6,500 to 65.25. I think there's some temporary upside potential on ES. If we lose 64.80, we could turn lower, but I don't favor that. I think we favor the all-time high again, and then we're going to see if we get a rejection from there to get back down to the lower trend line. That's what I think is very probable for ES for now. On NQ, we're looking bullish. Now, there is a head and shoulders like pattern, so be very cautious, but I do think we might go a little higher. If we lose 23,600, we could dump a lot lower, but this is technically favoring 23,900 to 24,000 is our targets. And then we're going to see if we turn down from 24,000. I do think we might be pushing close to the all-time high, and we'll see if we turn from there, but look for some upside potential, at least for now. For other tickers out there, we also happen to have Bitcoin, which looks a little bit more bullish because we have an inverse head and shoulders. We have a left shoulder, head and right shoulder. We need to hold above 112,780 to push higher for 114,000. But if we lose 111,000, we're turning back down. So I'm favoring 114,000 as our target. And we'll see if we get some kind of rejection or not. For Tesla, we're technically on an uptrend, but this might be dipping a bit lower for essentially 340, and we'll see if we bounce. So look for 340 to 343, and we'll see if we rebound, but be very, very patient. For Nvda, we're looking not so great ever since President Trump announced that he wants to increase tariffs on semiconductors. If we break 170, we're looking for an attempt for 173. But if we lose 165, we could turn back down. So I just think that we shuffle a bit on Nvidia like this. We're going to see if this is an inverse head and shoulders like pattern or not that's forming. But I think we consolidate between 170 and 166 for some time before potentially bouncing. So keep that in mind. Aapl could retest 237. We'll see if we bounce or not. If we don't, we could be dipping towards 235. So look for 237 to see if we bounce. If not, 235 is likely going to be coming. For Netflix, we're making lower highs right here. We're going to see if we can hold 1237. If we don't, we could be dipping to 1227. So watch to see if we get a bounce or not. As of right now, I'm favoring that we consolidate between 1250 and 1231. For MSTR, we're technically just trading sideways. We have resistance around 332.5 and support at 320. Watch 332.5 and see if we reject, but I do think we push a little bit higher for the mid at 330s. For Celsius, we're flat here. We could try to retest this support becoming resistance around 57.65. I anticipate a small bounce, and we'll see if we reject or not off that area. Supermicro is very choppy, not really doing much, not really worth trading for now. We have support around 40 and resistance at 40.8, so I just expect us to trade sideways, not really doing a whole lot. On Palantir, I think we might be retesting 158 if that breaks. We're looking for the 160s, but if we lose 155, we're turning back down to 152. So far, I'm favoring 158. Rivian, as long as we don't lose 13.94, we're going to be favoring an attempt for 14.4. For SoFi, we're looking a bit more bullish. As long as we don't end up losing 25.34, we're going to be favoring 26.5 as our potential target. AMD is holding up well as long as we don't end up losing 148. I see consolidation here, then attempts to bounce for like 155. I need to see 150 hold. If it doesn't, we're going to be dumping a lot more. It's like 145. Hopefully, we try to hold 150 for now, consolidate, and try to bounce for 155. ARM will likely retest 137, and we're going to be looking to see if it bounces off that. If it doesn't, it could be dipping lower. So watch 137 and we'll see how it ends up holding up. We have 68.769 as our resistance targets for PayPal, so I might be pushing a bit more, and we'll have to see what happens from there. Coinbase needs to break past 303. If that breaks, we're looking for 307. We'll see what happens. Amazon's looking a bit more bullish, just making higher lows right here, and we could be favoring an attempt for essentially 238 to 240. Meta also has a nice inverse head and shoulders like structure. As long as you don't lose 750, you're looking for a bounce for 768. Google's kind of weak here. If we can't hold above 236, we're going to be favoring 230. And then Microsoft is also trying to bounce, getting back up to about 502. So there is some upset potential. Also notice that DJT is trying to bounce for essentially 17.25. The VIX is rejecting here. If it doesn't hold above 15.7, it could be dipping to like the lower 14s. The 10-year is also dipping back down below 4. The dollar is also rejecting, going back down to like 97.25. Then crude is also kind of flat right here, so we have to give this some time. So my interpretation is that for now, okay, the market looks like it might go a little bit higher, but be very careful the higher we go on SPY and the QQQ, because at all-time highs, we have rejected many times. So I still would be very careful. So around 600, 650 to 652 on SPY, be very careful. On the QQQ, be careful between 580 and 582. Although we may retest that, be careful at that resistance. Tesla, however, is weak, and it's going to likely continue to dip back down to 343.5 and eventually 340. And we'll see if we could bounce near 340. But I anticipate a little bit more downside. Then we'll see if Tesla could bounce. Keep in mind, on the daily time frame, there's this big gap to fill. So I do think Tesla's going to be dipping to fill that gap at 338. So keep that in mind. We'll see what Tesla ends up doing as time goes on. But with that being said, I want to thank you all so much for listening. Have an awesome rest of your guys' days. I'll be back tomorrow with another update before the market opens. Until then, I wish you all nothing but the best, and I'll see you guys very soon on the next one. Thank you for listening, and peace out.